something stopped recording, which is very annoying.
The rainbow Ouroboros.
The most unpleasant version of the rainbow. Oh, okay. It's now said it is recording. Okay, sorry.
Fantastic. Chapter 5, Morna Finnegan's Who Sees the Elephant? Sexual Egalitarianism in Social Anthropology's Room. The stories that we tell matter. Anthropology's preoccupation with man the hunter, man the warrior, the farmer, the accumulator, this obsession with male warfare, subsistence, or territory, a hyper-focus on male strategic and reproductive interests, leaves us with a complex hierarchy as the auto setting for the species. That dominance, hierarchy, ownership, elite power is the only version of humanity. This one story has dominated the imagination. This paper, building on Ardner's previous chapter and the questions raised there, if the models of a society are derived from male experience and priorities, the male collective body, how can we hope to achieve a complete picture of ourselves without listening to what the female collective body is saying, especially where it is still active? Everything we know about ourselves is only partial. What has been overlooked is women's cooperative strategies as a driver for shaping and maintaining social and cultural systems, and the presence and importance of children. That humans are not simply individuals, separate data points, but also defined by the relationships and care that connects them. By drawing upon established ethnographies of contemporary and recent past egalitarian hunter-gatherers, the works of James Woodburn, Richard Lee, Alan Barnard, more recently Jerome Lewis, along with biological anthropology and primatology, and research coming out of genetics, archaeology, and linguistics, all represented in papers in our book, an alternative story of human origin emerges. One that counters dominance, hierarchy, privatization, and ownership with one of sharing, of connection, relationship, and autonomy. The evolutionary fuel of reproductive difference. In 1981, Karen Endicott and Eleanor Leacock pushed back on the theory of universal male dominance, noting ethnographers that actually lived with hunter-gatherers found alternative theories feasible, but warned that that sexual egalitarianism may not conform to Western expectations, that sameness should not be confused with equality. We see that with male dominance, the first thing to suffer is child welfare. And this is echoing the danger of infanticide seen in primates from incoming males. And that avoiding or curbing infanticide may have been an evolutionary driver in hominin evolution. Now, in immediate return hunter-gatherers who travel light, unencumbered by possessions or by constrictive social ties, demonstrate an overarching commitment to the protection of children as the nerve center of the community. The protection of children as the nerve center of the community. And this is what would be expected from societies in which the female procreative body has maintained a loud corporate presence. This brings in Chris's origin model, the human revolution, being rooted in the aggressively egalitarian behavior of women's collectives, where female inviolability was decisively established by coalitions of mothers supported by their kin. I quote, "With complex egalitarianism no longer one possibility among many, we become a species in whose evolutionary gristle cooperative breeding is lodged, along with its corollaries, female sexual solidarity, continual infant contact, habitual sharing, motion, a healthy distrust of authority, and enshrined respect for individual autonomy. With this motion, power is continually redistributed through ritual dialogue premised on periodicity. And at the heart of this sits the procreative body. Engel's primary themes to be negotiated between the sexes, children, sex, desire, and its uses, are central to hunter-gatherer societies. A ritual dynamic keeps the collective discussion open, keeps the issues public, and subjected to continual renegotiation. This model for how egalitarian power functions through the strategic opposition of one subgroup to another, the performance of conflict through dance, and the periodic ritual withdrawal of one sex from another provides a valuable paradigm for looking at power and its uses in contemporary hunter-gatherer society. Now we take this to human origins and the symbolic revolution. Where encephalization is foundational, the question becomes, how did females fuel the production of increasingly large-brained and burdensome offspring? Those of us who read Blood for menstrual synchrony, forcing males into increased paternal investment, extended courtships, relating with a partner, and crucially, relating with babies. The selection pressures would then favor cooperative males over alphas. Biological changes were combined with symbolic amplification through the relation of menstrual blood with game blood. And with our sex strike theory, females unite to send away mates to procure meat, using the signal of menstrual blood and phase-locked rituals with the lunar cycle. Symbolically signaling wrong time, wrong sex, wrong species. Thus, women's collective action overrid pair bonds, structured big game hunting, and provided nutritional support to mothers and children. Looking at primatology, Sarah Hrdy observes that all apes share a capacity for Machiavellian intelligence. All are socially astute, sharing cognitive capacities and incipient theory of mind. What distinguishes humans is the need to connect and share inner states with others, to intuit intentions, communicate ideas, and be deeply affected by what others are thinking. Intersubjectivity. All of this she attributes to our ancient evolutionary history of cooperative breeding. We share resources, but we share our children too. Cooperative breeding leads to emotional modernity, without which there is no human. And reliable alloparental care would have preempted and facilitated the development of symbolic thought and language. So how does this then apply to the division of labor in current hunter-gatherers? We see a relationship between women as producers of people and an ambivalent relationship with game animals and hunting technology. Looking at the Bengele concept of Aquila, quote, it refers to both women's menstrual blood and the blood of game animals, weaving successful hunting into successful childbearing and expressing a profound taboo against the mixing of substances. Jerome Lewis stresses the complementarity integral to it. Through women's ritual tracking and tying of game, they give men meat. Through men's repeated contributions of sperm throughout pregnancy, they give women babies. In this manner, each sex contributes to the other's valued activity. This in turn echoes ethnography of Southern and East African hunter-gatherer groups, where the female procreative fluids are in continual ritual conversation with male productive fluids. We also have on offer a little correction that the danger to hunters does not come from a condition of uncleanness in the women. Rather, she is in a state of extraordinary power. This symbolic antipathy between female blood and the blood of game animals exempts women from the hunt. They do not need to. Rather than they are excluded. And it compels men to return the meat to the community. Going into antipathy as power. Here we make a brilliant distinction between women being able to perform the same tasks as men and whether or not they choose to. to choose between the performance of energetically demanding tasks and the successful production and feeding of an infant. The crucial deciding factor appears to be whether or not women are able to work collectively, making use of other women's support, and engaging in labor which does not require them to leave small infants for long periods of time. Cooperative mothering, for instance, nursing each other's babies while working cooperatively, in contexts where continued breastfeeding and late weaning can make the difference to infant survival. It's a system that's flexible, dynamic, fluid, this fluid nature of care. And through such solidarity, women are able to elicit male provisioning, ensure sharing, enable women to remain close to vulnerable infants. Shifting Brightman's narrative of female biology's relation to culture as weak, passive, sedentary, and unable to participate in career, to female biology fueling powerful ritual systems which afford women a substantial cultural presence. Female biology fueling powerful ritual systems which afford women a substantial cultural presence. Looking at ethnographical examples, we have the Bayaka. Women are the arms of the hunting nets. The Bobanda functions as a frame for Bayaka ideas about the division of labor as interdependent, an expression above all of the work men and women do for each other. Always called when men's hunting luck is considered poor, it involves mobilizing women's ritual labor, singing, dancing, and conversation with game spirits, raising power and vitality and transferring it to selected male hunters. According to Macready, given the considerable commitment required of women to what may be days of hard physical and ritual activity, they demand the recognition of men. The men and the entire community are at the mercy of women and must convince them to perform. The women cannot be coerced. In the Baka, through the exclusively female Yeli and Yengepoto ritual associations that focus on the large game hunting, using divination, oneiromancy, the dream interpretation for telling the future, and they are in charge of organizing ceremonies. They locate and attract game, they designate the hunter to make the kill, and they offer gratitude to the game spirits. And through their privileged relationship with the spirits, the women participate in the hunt, which affords them substantial claims to the meat. The Yaka, the women participate in the elephant hunt through the Makondi Masana of Yele. In trance, they tie up the elephant's spirit and then direct the men to it, this being referred to as a woman's hunting trip. Jerome Lewis says that the ongoing distribution of power represented by Masana activities, that Masana deliberately glorifies the forest, the gender groups, and the joy and inherent beauty of their coordination and mutual cooperation in distinctive but complementary ways. Now, a hunter's failure to respect the game animals or violate taboos destroys hunting luck and puts the hunter in direct danger of attack from enraged animals. And these taboos, where one thing is negatively associated with another, menstruation, parturition, and female sexual fluids, a composite femaleness, must not be mixed with hunting. In all hunting societies, this is conceived as the most powerful relationship in the cosmological and religious sphere. An alternative logic reveals itself through this antipathy. Women's absence from the hunt signifies their power. This move away from the bodies of animals, women collectively become sacred. They have a privileged position to communicate with and attract or repel animals and the spirits integral to the success of the hunt. This sexual egalitarianism is the invisible elephant hiding in anthropology's intellectual room. I quote, "The indisputable reality that humans are cooperative child carers, together with the rich symbolic field open around the reproductive body, in those contexts described here indicates the most basic materialist rationale possible, that of survival. There is nothing stronger than the will to stay alive, except perhaps the will to keep one's child alive. And some might argue that we are in desperate need as a species of potential alternatives to the kinds of power arrangement that have led us to where we are now. Wrapping up with complex egalitarianism, communism in motion. We have from Peter Gao, desire, hunger, and sharing are what animate the lines running between women and men, sex and meat. Desires which link people inevitably to certain other people. Morna continues, it is in the relational, dialogical space between different bodies and corporeal desires that sociality and hence society is made. Women's ritual relationship with game animals and meat is inseparable from the politics of mothering in such communities, and from men's corresponding ritual involvement in female fertility. To make all of this move, we have the lunar clock. Continual motion between fission and fusion, sexual solidarity and marital solidarity. Time and power become dialogical in nature, social and sexual, or domestic and ritual. I quote, society here is using the scepter of the state, the specter of the state, thank you, using the potential for collapse, using concentrations of power and conflict on the most primal level, that of the body, and using a sophisticated dialogue with raw force in order to churn up the political landscape and keep the argument live. Real pro-social power, then, is at root ambivalent, designed to thrive off difference, eliminating distinctions other than that of the sexes of wealth, power, and status, a political system that waxes and wanes. What happens when a society moves away from sensual experience? Towards the end of the Pleistocene, people settled, put up fences and walls, stored food instead of sharing it, privatizing children to ensure hereditary lines, turning the pro-social to anti-social. Children were physically able to survive without contact and the nurture that their brains and bodies have evolved to expect. Intersubjective focus turning from relational to defensive, leading to the phenomenon of disorganized attachment, and teens that have trouble interpreting the needs of others being significantly more aggressive and prone to behavioral disorders. So, the stories we tell of our origins matter today. The paper concludes, implicit in the lack of interest of many social anthropologists in our common evolutionary heritage is the assumption that male political alliance is the obvious foundation for society. Even the most radical thinkers, Rousseau, Kropotkin, never got close to the possibility that human nature might have been formed in a whole other kind of evolutionary milieu, one in which coalitions of mothers and fellow mothers take center stage. From man the hunter or man the warrior, then we come around not to some female equivalent, but to the figure of the child, which culture evolved to protect. I don't know how you follow that with anything, so I'll let somebody else contribute.
Well, Morna's made it. Fantastic.
Can Morna show herself? Can you put, is that possible, Morna? And of course, I need to unmute people, don't I? Is that right?
I think
can Morna unmute yourself, or do I have to unmute you? Last one.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted.
Oh, well done. You don't have to speak on your own chapter.
I came on late because, you know, on Friday evenings are difficult to get space. But I came on and heard Jacob reading this really nice paper. I was thinking, who's that? That's interesting. It took me a few seconds to clock that it was my own. Um, and you read it so beautifully, Jacob. It's amazing how when someone else takes your writing and reads it, you know, like in a compelling way, how you hear it again. So that was really nice. I'm sorry I haven't been able to make more of these because, you know, I know it's a really nice way to share work and ideas. Well, thank you for reading it.
I don't think I've ever heard a more eloquent, well-spoken summary of Morna's work, which in turn sort of encapsulates the work which our team has been doing all these years. I mean, somehow there's a kind of synergy there with Jacob. I mean, is it your acting skills? I don't know what it is, but your speaking skills and your gestures as you speak, it just gives every word absolute wonderful bodily sort of meaning. And Morna, I don't know, the way you've put it all together is just so astonishing. I was just reading it again, of course, an hour ago, and I just thought, wow, how on earth is this not the thing which everybody that wants a better world is reading? I mean, how can it still be not recognized in the room? This I mean, this whole book, of course, but I mean, this is just a wonderful, one of the many wonderful chapters, which is so well worth reading again. I missed so much of it when I read it first couple of times. So thank you, Jacob and Morna. It is very hard to follow. But Katrin, you were going to try and have a big effort to make all the people who've been denied a voice or felt intimidated, make everyone feel relaxed. So over to you, Katrin.
Well, I don't have anything to say right this minute, but yeah, I do want to work on ways for people to jump in whenever they want.
There was just one place, and just very briefly, when I thought, Morna, you were being rather generous to Sarah Hurdy, because you described her as where is it now? As her fundamental point is at least matrilineal. Oh yes, you say what distinguishes humans, this is on page 135, what distinguishes humans is the need to connect and share inner states with others, to intuit intentions, communicate ideas, and be deeply affected by what others are thinking. Now, Jacob read that out, and then he go on, all of this she attributes to our ancient evolutionary history of cooperative breeding, and she assembles a huge wealth of data to support her contention that these first cooperatively breeding communities were kin-based matrilineal communities, where mothers had access not only to their own kin, but crucially came to depend on assistance from others in rearing their young. And it's lovely that you say that, and you are right, Morna. I mean, this is entirely the implication of her thinking, but that's the one thing which Hurdy hardly sort of dares say, but sort of suggests it. It's such a heresy to suggest that early human kinship was matrilineal, and it's such a heresy as a biological anthropologist or a primatologist to think that, you know, that as great apes we could have been anything other than male philopatric. I mean, all the primatologists say, well, great apes, obviously, you know, the females move out, they lose connection with their mother. So obviously humans are great apes, so it must be true for humans as well. So what you're saying about Hurdy, Morna, is what she sort of didn't quite dare say herself, although it's sort of there, implied there, although Camilla may slightly disagree with me. Maybe she thinks so. I mean, she has said,
well, I don't disagree.
So Sarah has said to us verbally that she agrees with our position on matrilocal residence.
If you look at her book and the structure of her book, she puts all the grandmother stuff right at the back. So for somebody who just read like halfway through the book and got the idea, they would think, oh, but it isn't about female philopatry. But there's a fundamental constraint on her theory that you have to have females with kin-related females to start the whole ball rolling. And she doesn't make that clear enough. So there are still people who think that when Hurdy's talking about cooperative breeding, she just means mummies and daddies, but she doesn't just mean mummies and daddies, and that's not how it starts. It starts with the female coalitions, and then you start to get daddies as well.
Yeah, I mean, she gets there at the end, and you can feel. I feel like she's getting more and more political. You know, probably to do with where her own conclusions are prompting her to say and to go. And I mean, one of the things that I love about her is that she does, like, she kind of almost is straddling these two worlds. You know, she's just like on the cusp of, and all you have to do is like add a little bit of data there, and you're moving into, you know, real like deep politics, social and cultural kind of political action and cosmology and everything. It's all kind of there. But I know what you mean, Chris. I think I love her because I found her at a time where I really needed that deep time perspective, you know, and it fits so perfectly with the hunter-gatherer ethnography.
As Camilla's just mentioned there, I mean, all too many people, and I know this from the Evo Lang conferences I've been at every 2 years for God knows how long. So many people go, oh yes, Sarah Hurdy, yes, it needs mummy and daddy to bring up a kid. You know, that's it. So we're back to the nuclear family again, on the authority of Sarah Hurdy.
It's a travesty. It's just a travesty.
Yeah. No, she does draw out a lot of very important conclusions, one of which is basically looking at what happens whenever you lose that. You know, because it's out of the, you know, we know the nuclear family story. We know the mummy and daddy, you know, in the house story. She comes at the end of that book to this question of, given that we evolved, you know, emotionally and socially in these tight female kin groups, given that we evolved in these clusters, what's going to happen now to our kids who are living out of contact so much of their lives and away from that kind of heat of the communal self? She doesn't put it in those words, but she's asking this question, and she says, you know, capacities that took hundreds of thousands of years to evolve and develop, millions of years actually, it can be lost if we're not putting them to use anymore. So she's making a call at the end of that book, I think, for something other than the nuclear family, for sure.
I mean, I understand she's a walnut farmer now in Northern California. Is anyone in contact with her, or does anyone have a sense of how involved she is in activism or academia? Or
yes, I was quite a lot in contact with her when I was just completing my book on Noam Chomsky, and she was. I wanted to include Sarah Hurdy in the final chapters, like there's a chapter called Before Language, and so I was citing her, and I wanted a photograph of her, and she sent me one, and then and of course I wanted to find out what she was doing, and she just told me that she got very, very, very severe migraine, and it's been for years and years and years, and it's really taking her out of a huge lot of activity, and then, of course, the fires in California, even a couple of years ago, were already very serious. I mean, obviously, compared with the recent fires, kind of nothing. And now I remember, I was trying to invite her to the conference of Eveling in Torun. And she says she's not doing any conferences, she's not going anywhere because of the migraine. Really sad.
She has been participating in Royal Society conferences, or at least she's author of papers with Judith Burkhardt. And I'm not sure whether she actually was physically in the conference, but she is somewhat. I mean, she's retired. I mean, she's kind of retirement, but she's still the most famous kind of Darwinian feminist on the planet. Except that she wouldn't overtly call herself that, or sometimes she might. When we met her in Chicago with Patty Guati, late in 90s. She would have been quite overt about sort of Darwinian feminism, and she still at that time was going with the great ape it can't be female filipatry, can it, when we talk to her? But she has moved from that position. She wouldn't be, she thinks that the science is kind of political enough. I don't think she would be overtly political herself, but as Morna says, the arguments about about what's happening to children, she's intrinsically going to be political because she and Kristen Hawkes with the grandmother theory, and some of us crazy lot with our female origins of symbolism, are almost the only people who stand against the man the executioner, man the warrior, male filipatry orthodoxy. We practically are. So she's intrinsically political for that reason. And of course, even Tomasello, I don't know if Katrin went and heard the Tomasello Zoom, even Tomasello is, and we heard Brian Hare at RAG as well, kind of diminishing Hurdy or putting Hurdy in the box that, okay, that can explain genus Homo, but it doesn't explain the rest of what we need to explain about Homo sapiens.
Tomasello did mention Hurdy yesterday, by the way, which was cool. Someone asked, so what are the actual origins of all of this cooperation? And he said, well, I think it comes out of our foraging past, and Sarah Hurdy has talked a lot about, but it was funny because the way he worded it, I had asked a question in the comments box, how did Sarah Hurdy's work come into this? So he mentioned our name, and I was really excited, but then he said Sarah Hurdy's made a big deal of our cooperative childcare, and the fact that he used those words, made a big deal of, I almost thought, well, did he see me mention her in the comments? Thought, I don't know, it just seemed weird. I couldn't tell if it was like an unbidden. Right.
He didn't try and integrate it in terms of ontogeny, because sometimes some recent papers, there has been a bit of movement between the Tomasello lot and Hurdy lot in terms of particularly in terms of Morna's important viewpoint that it's actually the child at the center, and actually these strategies are not just female strategies, they're child-driven strategies, and that's where the evolution starts. That's where the behaviors that change our patterns start, from the children. So Tomasello's kind of been saying something about that lately, but not in that talk.
It's very interesting.
It was very child focused. All his videos were comparing.
He's always child focused.
That's the huge problem with Tomasello, because he only he does both sexes with chimpanzees, but when it comes to humans, they're children, and they're not sexed. So he's kind of sort of gender blind when it comes to humans, because he never studies humans when they've grown up, and when sex begins to kick in, they're all little kids. So you have chimpanzees in a cage, and sort of underage kids where it doesn't matter what sex they are, and his conclusions are severely distorted really by his sort of experimental frameworks. Actually, the limitations of those.
It seemed I was there yesterday. He seems more concerned with cooperation as a behavior or as an abstract than humans. Exactly. And so his answer to that question was there wasn't a great deal of warmth to Hurdy's work, but he said that he felt that was valid, that cooperative breeding was valid, but it was also, it's half of the story. The other half is cooperative hunting.
Yeah.
And so he put them both in the space, which was more than I expected, but still it was more about his theory of cooperation than actual bodies and relationships between people.
And even when it comes to cooperative hunting, he doesn't really think that produces we intentionality, this crucial ingredient. He thinks that comes from circling the wagons, from war.
Group, yeah.
So I mean, it really is. He needs to listen a little bit more to Sarah, really, and not saying she makes a big deal out of it, which I'm afraid signifies to me that he feels a bit threatened by Sarah.
We got anybody else talk about aspects of Morna? I can say a little bit, but I don't want to talk very much because maybe I talk too much. I just wanted to say, I mean, everybody said what amazing chapter this is, but I just have to say, it's the way, you know, it's over and above Herdy. It's the way that Morna seamlessly brings together the biology and the body with the culture. Because Herdy never tries to do that. She doesn't do that. However generous Morna's been, she has all the ingredients, but she doesn't try and do that. And Morna is parlaying a lot of complex evolutionary material in a language that's really easy to understand, including Nadine Peacock's material on women's energetics and their work, and then going into this material on the symbolism of the hunt and so on, and the issues of egalitarianism. And I know how difficult that is, because I've been trying to do it for 30 years and I can't do anything like this. So it is, you know, it just is so amazing. And there's so much going on. This dialectic of antipathy of power, of the, you know, the fact that they're removed from the taboo, the hunting and the taboos and so on, is a current of power. It's wonderful dialectic. This putting into place the whole idea of Brightman's idea of that the sex division of labor, if women can't hunt, they must have less power. And this is just complete craziness if we think about it from an evolutionary perspective. But that's the standard position, and it was the position being generated by a kind of Western feminist diktat that if women can't hunt, if they can't do everything that men do, they must have less power. And there are male evolutionary anthropologists, Wrangham, Foley, Paul Seabright, who think that must mean men have control of the meat, and that must mean men must be able to control women through being able to, you know, make them have sex because of the meat. And this is just so far removed from the subtlety which Morna's pulling out with all of this discussion of Peter Gow, as well as Jerome Lewis's material of this, you know, the desire, work is what you do for the other sex, is just so sweet. It's such a sweet, beautiful definition, actually. That's from Macready, isn't it? I can't remember whose definition that was. You know, that goes with all the arguments about sexual conflict. Each sex wants the other one to do more work in animal terms, but when it comes to humans, each sex is giving to the other sex. So animals are always pulling it, humans are kind of giving it, and that makes so much difference. And then the issue of complex, I mean, Jacob couldn't mention everything, but of course there's Wenger and Graeber hiding behind there, or they're kind of waving behind there. And this issue of egalitarianism somehow not being complex, it is just so crazy. So I was just looking back at, it was Juarez's material on the hunting rituals for the Bako Naka. And she was talking about how the ritual associations in villages that are 30 or 50 people, there'll be as many as 6 or more ritual associations. There could be 20 ritual associations in just those small camps. So the idea that there is a lack of complexity in this, as Morna's always got it, this incredibly flexible, this incredibly fluid, everyone's moving. And it comes back to what Nirrit Bird David was talking about on Tuesday, the connectivity. But of course, Nirrit Bird David was, because of her perspective from the Nayaka and South Asia, which is really quite a different attitude from the African hunter-gatherers, Nirrit Bird David was disarming the idea of egalitarianism. And she was I mean, although bodies are there with her, they're not there in such a potent way as they always are in Morna's text, in Morna's discussion and discourse. And again, you know, Morna's description of egalitarianism is attacking egalitarianism. And that's what it has as its political idea, that you're asserting egalitarianism. You're not just letting it happen. It's not going to happen unless you assert But when it's talking about aggressive egalitarianism, it's from children and women, is this aggressive egalitarianism. So, and it's from children and women dancing and singing. That's aggressive egalitarianism for you. So, yeah, so complex egalitarianism. There's just so many riches in that chapter, and how it all got fused together in this lovely melange is quite amazing stuff. Yeah, I'll shut up now. Somebody else can say. One interesting question is to think about how Morna's chapter reflects on that recent sensational news stories about the female burial in the Andes of 9,000 odd years ago. Quite interesting one, actually, that if people are interested in that, we can talk about that.
Could I just also add another general point in relation to the discussions we were having a couple of weeks ago about what we kind of briefly call culture wars over whether you're allowed to make a connection between evolution and culture, and the widespread dismissal of that connection. I think that one of the things that comes across to me, Morna, most clearly from your paper, from the whole book, but your paper in particular, is that you actually get us past the idea that to admit a connection between our biology and our culture is to be essentially deterministic or indeed fatalistic about what we can be. In other words, our biology limits or restrains or stops short our capacity for cultural invention. And what Morna is saying, I think, almost more clearly than anyone else in the book, although we all say it in some way, is that actually our biology is a driver, a motor of culture, and what culture is doing is building on what's there biologically and turning it into something different and something new and something innovative, but that there is no limiting relationship between our biology and our culture. And I think, Morna, you've done that absolutely beautifully in your paper.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Hilary. That's, you know, I think sometimes when you've written something a long time ago, and then, you know, you kind of go off on various other, down various other roads. I wrote that chapter in the middle of a big move, actually. I was moving house. So it's amazing, actually, that you know, you're saying it reads coherently, because I wasn't feeling very coherent. But it's been, you know, this is really from the moment that I wanted to go back into anthropology, having taken a few years out between the master's and the PhD, and do the PhD. I just, you know, I remember being gobsmacked that you had the feminist literature on one hand trying to move us all on from, you know, this kind of embarrassing, you know, mess of the female body, and the fact that it excluded us from culture, apparently. And then you had this incredible hunter-gatherer ethnography with these women using the most graphic kind of earthy parts of the body to express cultural sophistication and solidarity, and to create this amazing virtual pendulum. And, you know, the fact the two weren't fitting together. And then when you look at the biological anthropology, you know, you have the kind of the final layer. And feminism has suffered such a loss, you know, because of this. We've really, it's like we've taken what is most fierce and, you know, full of creative potential, and we've ditched it because we believed the story. The story being that we weren't powerful if we were our own bodies and our own skin and our own wombs, and that our children were really a bit of a handicapped and, you know, an unfortunate thing that we were going to have to deal with for a few years before we could get back into the real world. And it's really disgraceful, because it not only impacts on us as human beings, it impacts on our children directly. I mean, and you see it if you live in these systems day after day, but it also impacts on grandmothers. Where's the grandmother in the global political arena? Where's the hag? Where's the old woman? You know, and I was teaching a class last week on witchcraft, and we were looking at the witch persecutions, and also in relation to things like Bakhtin and his work on carnival and the hag, the crone mother giving birth. And I was really, really struck by the fact that, you know, it's not just the loss of the female body, it's all the different ages of the female body. It's the children, it's the young women, it's the mothers, and it's, you know, the grandmothers, the witch, you know, the powerful, those women I saw dancing at Mbula with Ejegi, the two eldest women in the camp controlling the most powerful spirit, and the younger women behind them. And, you know, I realized, and I'm realizing, you have to get rid of that older woman. You have to get rid of her in order to exploit the younger generation. And so that fact of keeping the body there, by any means necessary almost, in the academic writing, in any story that we tell about evolution, you know, and human political possibility, there has to be that female body. But, you know, if you branch it out as hunter-gatherers do, all of us in our bodies, all of us being articulate because we are bodied, because we're able to connect with one another in that way. And it's astonishingly complex. If you think about this idea that for a long time, you know, the idea that egalitarianism was simple, and kind of a little bit boring and a little bit, you know, there wasn't lots of bloodshed, and you didn't have kings. And the fact that when you look at any, as Camilla says, you look at a hunter-gatherer camp in action on any given day, and you see virtual sophistication of a level that goes beyond anything tech can come up with. Because to be able to use your own body in the absence of any other instrument, to be able to pull everything out of yourself, you know, the music and the blood and the dreams and the dance, and use that as a force for creating sophisticated political motion, is extraordinary. Anyway, yeah, I'm really glad to have to go back and read some of this stuff, because it reminds me that putting things together and bringing in all the different strands is important, and the academic work is important, because that's, you know, as Chris says, that's where the science is. That's where you're really bringing hard facts to your own sense of things, and it's important. Yeah, and it does. I mean, I'm thinking a lot these days about where we are as a species and about the children. And it's funny how, you know, we seem to have circled round to the point in our species development or lifeline where we're going to have to kind of reenact that moment where women push themselves out into the public arena as a force, as a body, and are able to somehow articulate this kind of, you know, it's survival now. It's not any longer, you know, kind of maybe we will, maybe we won't. And you do that for the children in the society, not just my children, but, you know, yours, or all of our children, as people like the Benjeli or the Juntois do. Yeah.
When you say that the old hag, the witch, you've just got to get rid of that one. All of our fairy tales, you know, every single one, even the very, very, very powerful witches, you know, I mean, it is just a theme, the theme of fairy tales, that Doesn't matter how powerful the king is, he hasn't got the right body to be really, really, really powerful. And that's the wicked godmother, or the wicked witch.
He's got to steal it somehow.
And
Yeah. Also, I think, you know, there is kind of like, it's amazing because you realize that there has been historically this long kind of wrangle between, you know, the kind of power body that Bakhtin talks about, where you have, you know, the hags or the witch still vocal, still public, and then the alternative. And you also realize that actually, like Jerome says about the Benjeli, there's almost a sense of mortal danger, you know, for in the collective psyche about women, older women in particular. I think, you know, being publicly acknowledged, valued, made central, because we have in our history this episode where there was this crushing, stamping out of that archetype, and actually physically, you know, what's the estimate for the witch persecutions in Europe and America? How many people were burned and drowned and hung? And these were almost like those Benjeli grannies that I watched dance.
Yeah.
That's what had to be annihilated in order to privatize the rest of us. They're the ones in any camp who are like, you know, pecking hens. They'll be right on top of you the moment you try to hoard something. So, you know, bringing them in as well. It seems really essential, and connecting things like Kirsten Hawkes and Herdy to the ethnography, even if biological anthropologists aren't doing that themselves, that we do it. You know, because there's a story there that is just so obvious and has so many interconnecting parts, and it needs to be told, as you all know.
The very first line of your thesis is, culture is biology. That is the thesis. This is the message of this work. I mean, that was just, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly feel some uncomfortability. I think for me, this has always been kind of a tension I have within RAG, is that I also kind of, I can't help but notice, but you know, that there's a lot of women in RAG like myself, you know, who have chosen not to, you know, not to be mothers and not to have that be a big part of our life. So sometimes I think it's funny that we sit around talking about how women's power is located in, you know, their being baby minders and their lactation and all of these things that simultaneously a lot of us, I think, don't gravitate towards. And it's certainly that it's like something that doesn't sit well with me. I have to say, a lot of times, you know, reading that apparently my power as a woman comes from these things, because when I hear that, like a couple weeks ago, you know, and there were these, you know, stories coming out that like almost fully half of the hunters, you know, found buried with hunting paraphernalia or female. And my reaction, I have to say, emotionally, was just like excitement, because like extrapolating myself back into the past, I think I probably would have enjoyed, you know, the intellectual work of tracking animals, which it is, you know, it is an intellectual, you know, hunting is, in that way, is an intellectual enterprise. And that speaks to me more than, you know, being back at camp looking after kids. I have to say, so it's always something that's, you know, been difficult for me to, you know, fully take on board. And I guess it's just like, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. If that's where my fundamental power comes from as a woman, then I don't know what to do, because I don't gravitate towards being a child carer. So, and I think there's a lot of women in RAG who come from that perspective. That's why we spend our free time, sitting around thinking about these things, right? So I just never know what to do with that tension. Yeah, so.
And I know I've said a lot already, Catherine, so I don't want to talk a lot more, and I don't want to contradict you or challenge that either, because I know that on many levels you're right. So my 9-year-old has just pushed a note under the door saying "hurry up," as if on cue.
There are tensions.
Yeah, we're supposed to be doing the fire and baked potatoes, and I'm sitting here talking. But what I wanted to say is this is one of the really core points, is that we don't have to get stuck at female biology as an individual thing, because if you do, you're not much better than the essentialists, who would have us limited by that or to it, and it becomes a limiting factor. The whole point is we're defined by what we share. So I think that the fact that in any real community, we take these assumptions out of the equation. So hunting, going out, tracking an animal, killing it, is somehow more challenging, more demanding of the intellect than trying to entertain a bunch of really curious, 2 or 3-year-olds, and educate them and communicate with other mothers, while also knowing where to go for the right tubers, and maybe having to thatch your roof, and working out the next dance. It's like we put things into boxes. Our body, our biology, our work as mothers goes in one box. Hunting goes in another box. And then these things get wed against each other. So I don't think that it's really a case of saying that being a mother or not being a mother somehow excludes you from this. It's the use of principles to create energy, and to also ensure that those mothers, those women in camp who do have the babies, or the ones out foraging, or the ones hunting, because we know that women do engage, of course, in small scale hunting wherever they can, and they're good at it. It's the fact that they don't have to. It's the fact that what they do is sufficiently valued, so that at the points of their life where they can't hunt, and you are at certain moments of your life as a reproductive body, if you choose to do that, it's very useful that there's this taboo around you running around the forest with a spear. If you're 8 months pregnant or breastfeeding, it's actually ingenious. And if you look at all the data, what you see is that it's women insisting on this. Meanwhile, they're out hunting whenever they feel like it. As they forage, they can catch a small animal, and they're very skilled at it. And we know that with the Mbuti, they do the net hunting as well, with their husbands and brothers. They have no problem with that. What's interesting is the cultural taboo, saying that men should go out, they should catch the hardest to catch and kill animals, which then they can't touch them. They have to bring them back to camp, deliver them to the women, usually the elder women, which means the mothers, who butcher them and cook them. And the women also go in trance and track the animal first. The Inuits say it's the woman to whom the animal comes. There's a wonderful paper by Barbara Bodenhorn where she says, when you speak to Inuit hunters, they say if you don't have a female accomplice, you can't hunt, because the animal comes to her. It's her who tracks in trance and ties the spirit. And it's also her who offers makes all the ritual offerings afterwards. So that's full of intellect. but it's just that we're stuck in our own definitions. And I also think, you know, if we're going back to the past, we have to realize as well that keeping children alive in the group will have been a collective endeavor, whether you had one yourself or not.
Exactly.
Everyone's involved. And you know, and in the camp at Mbula, some of the people I saw jiggling babies in hip slings, the most were boys. There were lots of teenage boys, you know, and if they were passing, slinking off to do whatever they were going to do in the forest, somebody would just stick a baby on them. And they had to be involved because they had as much part in nurturing and these children and giving the children the chemical, the tangible, you know, connection with the male body that's so important to people like the Aka. Barry Hewlett's work is wonderful. He tells us that men, Aka men spend 5 times more of their time than any other fathers holding and nursing and taking care of kids. And then, you know, you have all the Amazonian literature and the Kuvade and the fact that there you have young men, again, drawn into the pregnancy. They go through the pregnancy of their wife or partner. They actually go through the morning sickness, and they suffer the same food taboos, and they talk about feeling pain at the birth. They're taking there, just as women take, you know, the hunt, they're taking reproductivity, they're taking female fertility, and everything enters the cultural sphere and gets shared. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I wasn't saying that, you know, say women's work is not intellectual. I was just sort of acknowledging that, you know, I don't know, there's something attractive of, you know, the act of following animals through the landscape. You know, I think that's probably what I would have wanted to be doing. You know, so, but yeah, absolutely. It's not to say that women's work isn't intellectually demanding, but yeah, I think it's important to address and kind of work through the sort of inherent tension, you know, between sort of saying that this is where women's power originates, and just the undeniable fact that many women, when given the choice, you know, choose not to do that work. So, you know, to me, it's like, if we don't talk about that, we're just leaving this like massive lacuna in the middle of, you know, in the middle of this stuff. So yeah, that was wonderful what you said. And it's just something I want to put out there, you know, that we need to make it legible. Amy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think about this a lot too. And like, especially now, the time in the world that we're living in, it's become a contribution to the future and to the future children by choosing to not have children. And that for me in this work, what's more striking than the biological capabilities that women have is the power that women have in solidarity in the coalitions, and that power is also very spiritually rooted. And that, like, it's that power of women's intuition and the women's connection that is really able to work in that power dynamic that we're not used to in the Western world. And so, like, for me, that's sort of where my interest is when I get caught up in the, like, well, I'm not having babies, so I don't know how I fit into this model. But also what's so striking to me in this paper is that the spiritual is brought up multiple times. And like, reading this, I'm so caught up in like where we are right now in lockdown, like gyms are open, but schools are closed. Like, what are we saying about how we care for children, and how we care for ourselves and the planet, and sort of like weaving that thinking in as I read this. But like, what's so missing in the Western is the spiritual, and that like we're so secular that doesn't come in, and that like the coalitions become purely political, and they talk about the body, but they're not in the body, which I think is like then why we get into the biological capabilities, because like pregnancy and nursing bring us into the body, but also like thinking about how not having children is helping future children. And like, there are ways that in our modern Western world, we're contributing to the future children without having to babysit, I guess, is what I'm saying, if that makes sense.
I wonder if we should let Morna, I'm just aware that Morna's son Francis is putting notes to the door. I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't let Morna go at this point if there's so much to do.
Yeah, I've just got another note saying, Mum, come on, hurry up. With
yeah, I think
exclamation marks.
I really think we should let you go, Morna. And it's so lovely that you were here.
Thank you.
You know, no, thank you so much. It's just, I mean, you know, that I think that's talking about sharing and you know, the ability to connect. You don't, nothing is really works, you know, as a standalone thing anymore. I think we have to, you know, it's the connections, and it's the fact that people feedback and challenge, you know, and we really look closely at stuff together. I wish I had a wee bit more space and time to do that. And I really loved your point, Catherine, you know, about being careful to kind of set up this, you know, mother goddess thing, but which could alienate others. It's really very much for me about the fact that we're all daughters, you know, and you could take that and look at that. I have a 14-year-old growing up in this mad world, and that's relevant too. But like I said, I think we're now really, we're working, all of us, in any way that we can for ourselves, for our own lives, but for each other. And that means, you know, to me anyway, it means for the children who still have so much possibility and who deserve to have a kind of community that is able to move beyond me and my needs and taking care of me. We've really done that to death now. So I guess that's what kids give us, isn't it? That's what Sarah Hurdy says. She says it's the young, you know, it's the big eyes and the way they look at you, and the way, you know, that they bring out the spontaneity. They're designed to do that, whether you have them or not. They're designed to elicit your protection and to make you care and to make you want to help them live on the most primitive level. I don't think there's any shame in admitting this, that we're touched, you know, really deeply by children and wanting to put them against, you know, all the other this power alliance full of stampeding, you know, old kind of Trump type alpha males. You know, let's put the children into the middle, followed by, you know, all the rest of us. Because
I wanted to just chip in there that before Morna goes, that perhaps the most encouraging political thing that happened was in the last 2 weeks when Marcus Rashford, this great hero, this footballer who's come from himself a background where he didn't have where he was raised in care, And he has fought a battle against the horrible Tory, corrupt Tory government to ensure that children who are in poverty will get free school meals, even when lockdown's happening, even when the half term is happening at school. So our American colleagues may not have heard about this story, but this has transformed, this has brought cooperative childcare right out of the whole of the British, of England, Scotland, everywhere, because as soon as Marcus Rashford stood up saying we've got to feed the children at half term, all these restaurants, all these cafes everywhere, a great map was produced of the whole of Britain, Scotland, Northern Ireland, everywhere, that saying we're going to give free school meals. Anyone comes along to get their free meals, we're going to produce them. Come with your kids, we'll give you free food. So suddenly communism, cooperative childcare was all just happening. And the main description of even some of the mildest Labour MPs were mouthing the Tory scum in Parliament, and this was trending on Twitter. The fact that they wouldn't feed the children whilst the whole of the rest of the country was insisting. So that was something that was very heartening. And it just, I don't think we can, I think Catherine's really well done to raise the issue, because it's something I haven't had children, it's something I've often thought about in RAG, that people at RAG are very often concerned, you know, they're working at this issue of having, of childcare and cooperative childcare, but themselves may not just women, but also men. And, you know, from my point of view, it really was looking at the situation that we do not have the collectivity. We have this privatization, and it was a situation that I just didn't really want to get into. Even if I would have wanted children, it was the social setup for it was just really not in the right place as far as I was concerned. So the other thing I would support is Amy's, you know, what Amy was seeing there in that chapter, in Morna's chapter, because you know, culture is biology, biology is culture. Morna's making this so clear that it isn't just reducing to mother and child. It is, female collectivity is producing the whole society. It is producing the art, the philosophy, the poetry, the beauty, the song, the dance, and it's doing the hunting as well. There's no limit to it. There isn't any limit. So I wouldn't see it as a constraint. I wouldn't see this description of women's power by Morna as a constraint. Just one more thing to say, Catherine, is Frank Marlowe's discussions of Hadza camps, and I've had some of this experience too. The idea that women are sitting in the camp baby minding all the time is completely, you know from a Hadza camp, this is just not true. What happens in a Hadza camp is they leave all the kids, one adult, often the male researcher, is left with all the kids to look after and mind, while the women go piss off to go and find themselves some bangy to smoke. I mean, you know, that is not, this is not a description of women having to be hanging with kids at the apron strings at all. These are women who are organized. An organization means they're women who have autonomy and freedom to decide what they want to do. That's what it is. Yeah.
So are we going to say, Morna, you can go now? Or
I have to go.
Yeah, I think if Francis would let you, we'd like to hear much more of you, but I think, I think the call is
let's
quite loud.
try another time.
Thank you so much, Morna. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Camilla, that's a brilliant note to leave on. Thank you.
Well, just wonderful to read it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I will keep trying. I have it in the diary for the next however many Fridays.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch in case we change it or chop it or change it to
I
Thursday? Would that be easier for you?
Would Thursdays be easier for you?
No, actually, no. I'm out on Thursday evening. I mean, Friday. This isn't a bad time. It's really just, you know, advanced planning and making sure that Francis isn't outside the door with his notepad, waiting for me. But that's something that I need to do, organized.
It's tough.
Yeah.
So
Well,
bye then, Morna. Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And I'll hopefully see you again over the next few weeks.
Hopefully.
Great.
Maybe that's a good note
Wonderful.
just to say that. So it's Thanksgiving here next Thursday. So I talked to Martin. He's supposed to do our next chapter. He was hiking with his daughter today, so he couldn't make it. But he said, "Oh gosh, you know, I hope the group decides to take next week off, just because I'd rather not be preparing on Thanksgiving." So I just wondered how people felt about skipping next week, because it comes right after the holiday and people here may be, you know, traveling. Yeah.
What do other people over there, like Jacob, feel?
I don't recognize Thanksgiving. It offends me to the core. So it's Thursday. Next Thursday is Thursday, and if this is meeting on Friday, I'll be prepared.
I think something is sacred, and this is, for me, this has definitely become sacred. It's more sacred than anything for me. This group, this family.
Yeah, there is the issue that it's Martin is supposed to be presenting, and if he can't make it, it's.
Oh well, we need to switch things down then. That's all. You won't mind if we.
Well, Amy was offering to do Chris Lowe.
Yeah, I could do that.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I do not celebrate Thanksgiving, but I have the week off from school, so
cool.
I can do Chris Lowe next week. No.
Okay, and we can
that saves Martin.
We can swap Martin to the other week.
Yeah.
And do we want to line up any more people up, or do we want to then take a break before Christmas, or what? What do we want to do? Do you want to keep it going?
Christmas is not for 5 weeks or something, is it?
Well, we've got two. We've got Amy, then Martin. There are like 3 chapters which are all very concerned with myth and cosmology, which is mine, Thea Skornes, and Ian Watts. Possibly they could wrap into a couple of weeks, all 3 chapters, not one each. But I think we need a reader for each of them. They all overlap a bit. And I don't know whether there's anybody who'd like to do
Perhaps
it.
in the new year we have a special focus on mythology. Perhaps.
Yeah, I mean that would we could do that. We could have a break after a couple more and come back in January. What, you know, or what?
Shall I switch the recording off at any rate?
Yeah, definitely.